Alexis Brody. I'm the adult librarian here. You are going to get an awesome presentation on Fort Tejon. This is Karina, right?
Karina Dunbar.
Okay, Karina Dunbar. Like I did say it right. She will be doing the presentation. We do have awesome databases here that you can also research this information on, like academic search mirror. There's a lot of professional articles there that you can also find information on Fort Tejon if she doesn't cover something you want to know. Okay, I'll leave you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for having me here. My name is Karina Dunbar. I am the president and the chairman of the Fort Tejon Historical Association. I'm also the director of marketing, PR, and membership. Now, aside from my association duties, I am also a park docent at Fort Tejon Historic Park. Now, how many of you have been there? Nice, I'm impressed. Okay, so Fort Tejon is a little gem of Kern County. It is my home away from home. If you've never been there, I highly recommend it. Please do come and see it. It's a beautiful piece of history. It's a beautiful piece of Tehachapi area and Santa Clarita history that, everything that revolves around what we have today started back in the 1840s and 50s. Now, one of the things I wanted to go over is how it started, why the fort was put over there, and who were the major players. So why the fort was built over there. In 1852, President Fillmore appointed Edward Beale to be the superintendent of Indian Affairs. And he sent him to California to oversee, to learn about the place, study the place, and find out how they can resolve the possible interactions between the new 49ers, the new settlers coming into the West, and the local Indians over there. Now, after studying the situation, Beale decided that the best approach was to set up a large Indian reservation at the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley and to invite displaced Indian groups to settle there. Okay? Now, what will be the purpose of the fort? Now, whenever people hear about fort, they think, oh, it's a military outpost. There's going to be wars. There's going to be fights and battles. No, Fort Tejon was there as a policing unit to make sure to keep the peace over there. It was there as a peacekeeping fort. Now, the post was established and was intended to guard the pass through the Tehachapi Mountains, because where the 5 freeway you see now, that used to be a major artery between LA and San Francisco. And it was also to protect and control the Indians who were living on the Sebastian Indian Reservation, and also to protect other Indians and white settlers, conflicting with each other. Natives of the Fort Tejon, some of the Indians who lived in Fort Tejon were prior to the establishment of the fort, were generally referred to as Amigdiano. There were an inland group of Chumash people who lived along the Santa Barbara Channel coastline. They avoided contact with the Europeans, and they did not work in any of the missions. Once the fort was established, they did civilian jobs. They helped build the place, make adobes and, work as civilians. And they also, delivered fresh fruits to the soldiers to buy. Now, choosing the site of the fort, on August 15, 1854, Major Donaldson, a quartermaster officer, chose the site. Also was known back then as Cañada de la Uvas, grapevine. And if you pass through the grapevine now, you will see wild grapes growing still in the area. The site, they liked that site because it was near a creek. There was water and there was plenty of wood, and it was only about 17 miles southwest of the reservation. Oops, sorry. Now, the Fort Tejon garrison, or the Fort Tejon fort, it became the headquarters of the 1st U.S. Dragoons. I will go a little bit further into what a dragoon is and how it falls. The average complement of the garrison of the fort, on the average, it would have about 225 souls. In 1858, when Fort Tejon became a station on the Butterfield Overland Stage mail route, the garrison provided military escorts through the pass. So now you've got, it's a major artery going back and forth, and now you've got a mail route going through the pass. So you had to make sure that, they weren't hijacked by, wagon robbers. The 1860 census listed 1960 soldiers and civilians living in the community. here I have a schedule of the overland Butterfield mail route. And as you can see, it stopped at Fort Tejon every Thursday and Sunday, and then on its way back, it would stop on Tuesday and, Wednesday and Sunday. Now, the mail route was great because it delivered mail from St. Louis, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee, all the way to San Francisco. Now, who put together the Fort Tejon? Who was responsible? Well, as you know, Lieutenant Edward Beale, he was the superintendent of Indian Affairs. He approved the location of the fort, and he made it as the headquarters of the Indian Affairs. And then from the Army side, you've also got Lieutenant Tom Castor. Lieutenant Tom Castor, he was a lieutenant. He was actually he fought in the Mexican-American War. He served in a variety of battles and posts from Minnesota all the way to California, and he established it in 1854. You've all heard of Beale's Cut? Okay. Well, Beale's Cut is Edward Beale. Actually, he didn't actually start the cut. Phineas Banning did. Edward Beale, he just made it even larger. Phineas Banning, anybody heard of Phineas Banning? Okay. Have you been to the Banning House? Awesome. Okay, if you haven't, that's another place that I recommend. It's down in Wilmington. He basically established the Long Beach port. So in 1854, Phineas Banning dug out the 30-foot gash in the mountains to provide a better passage to Fort Tejon. In 1861, Beale made it even longer and elongated the gap to 50 feet in height. The cut was used by the Butterfield Overland Mail, and Beale's Cut lasted as a transportation passage through the present-day Newhall Pass until the construction of the Newhall Tunnel was completed in 1910. And there's the cut. Thomas Castor. Lieutenant Castor was a West Point graduate. He was in a class of 1846. He was the 28th in his class. Upon graduation, he chose to be a dragoon. He served with distinction honor in the Mexican-American War, specifically the Siege of Veracruz, battles of Cerro Gordo, Contreras, Molina del Rey, and the capture of Mexico City. He worked at frontier duty from Minnesota to Oregon to California at Fort Snelling, Fort Ripley, Redding, Jones, Lane, Miller, and Tejon. As I previously mentioned, he established Fort Tejon in 1854, and he died of consumption in 1855. Consumption in today's terms would be tuberculosis, TB. Okay. And some of the things that Lieutenant Castor did is he ordered from his post at Fort Millard, California, to this Grapevine, and he led the 1st U.S. Dragoons, Company A. Here I have brought some uniforms and accoutrements that the U.S. Dragoons would have used and worn. He organized the locals to manufacture adobe brick on site and establish a sawmill in the vicinity of Montepinos. And records also show that he started, the building of the barracks and the cook shed, the blacksmith shop, and the quartermaster. So you haven't been to Fort Tejon, please do come and see, and then look at it from from Lieutenant Castor's point of view, and that's the fruit of his labor. This is what the Fort Tejon looked like back in the day. Hold on a second. This right here, that road is where the 5 freeway is now. Fort Tejon today is to the east of it. I'm sorry, to the west of it. And back then, Fort Tejon was from the footridge of, on the east side of the freeway all the way to the other side. The stables and the blacksmith shop were on that side back at the time. Now, of all the buildings, we have Barracks 1, Captain Gardner's house, and the quartermaster. U.S. Dragoons. Now, what do you think when you hear about dragoons? What's a dragoon? Is it like a dragon thing? No, U.S. Dragoons are also known as mounted infantry. So basically, they fight on foot and they fight on horseback. They are highly trained. They spend all day training and training and training. And usually they are graduates of West Point because the recruitment of them, they wanted to make sure that the soldiers were well read. Okay, they are well educated, but they were bored with the East, and they wanted glorified Wild West. Okay, and one of the things that they learned, because of the fact that they are highly trained as soldiers, but because of their educational background, they were shrewd negotiators. So they used more of negotiation instead of brute force to get the point across, to get things done. Okay, so U.S. Dragoons were highly trained, and they also, after the Fort Tejon was established and they did all the training and the Civil War had broken out, the U.S. Dragoons became, they gave birth to the first U.S. Cavalry. Now the Dragoons at Fort Tejon, what did they do? Well, they, aside from training all day, they patrolled the area. They settled disputes involving Indians and in the Tule and Kern River districts. They toured the Owens Valley, and in 1858, they established small sub-posts in San Bernardino. In 1860, Camp Katy was manned for a time by the Dragoons, and the Dragoons were even sent to LA on occasion to maintain order there. In June 1861, despite protests from the local ranchers, the Dragoons were transferred away from Fort Tejon, and with their departure, the civilian population melted away. So yes, in 1861, with the war breaking out, with Civil War breaking out, the soldiers were transferred from Fort Tejon. However, they did come back and reoccupy Fort Tejon on occasion in order to retrain, regroup, and go back into the Civil War as soldiers, as U.S. infantry and cavalry. Camel Brigade. Who's heard of camel brigades? Okay. Well, it is, people love associating camels with Fort Tejon. Lieutenant Beale, who was associated with all the facets of Fort Tejon's history, made the post as his headquarters. And serving as the director of the large survey team planning on Wagon Road from Texas to California, he brought a caravan of 34 camels across the Southwest. Now let me hold that thought. He actually ordered 33 camels, but en route to Fort Tejon, one camel died, but another camel gave birth to 2 calves. So he ended up with an extra one. Now, the experimental use of the camels was so successful at the time that Beale strongly recommended their continued use by the Army throughout the Southwest. The Civil War, in addition to other factors, put an end to his proposals. Now, there's a lot of gossip and lore about why the camels didn't work out there. Some say, it was they couldn't communicate them or they couldn't train them well. Well, there's also the fact that maybe they brought the wrong kind of camel, because the camels that were brought here at Fort Tejon came from the Middle East soft sands. Here at California, we have rocky terrains. It doesn't work out that well. Now, Camel Brigade at Fort Tejon, not. The camels were not an essential element of the fort's history. They were just there. The camels were at the fort for only 5.5 months, from November 1859 to mid-April 1860. The camels were never used by the soldiers at Fort Tejon. They were government property and were kept there before being moved to LA on their way to Benicia, where they were auctioned off at a financial loss to the government. Peter LeBec. You all know about Peter LeBec? No, my favorite story. Absolute favorite. Okay, so Peter LeBec was a mountain man. Okay, so there's a lot of different stories that you hear about Peter LeBec. Some are way off the charts, and some are more logical. So here's the basics. Peter LeBec was a mountain. He was roaming around the Fort Tejon area back in 1837. Note, Fort Tejon was built in 1854, so this is before Fort Tejon. He's roaming around the area looking for animals. He was going to kill and sell their hide, right? And then from the epitaph, we can see that he was killed by a bear. The person that he was with, his partner, buried him at Fort Tejon and carved on a tree, on the oak tree, Peter LeBec killed by a bear, October 17, 1837. Okay? Mind you, this is 1837, so this guy was killed by a bear. They buried him under the tree, and they covered him, and they carved on the tree. Now, between 1837 and 1854, a bark grew over the carving. So what you're seeing here is the mirror image of the bark, okay? So the soldiers, some of the officers, they knew and they had heard of someone being buried over there, but they were not certain of his exact location because the bark had covered the carving, okay? Now we fast forward to 1890. Okay, one of the Foxtail Rangers ladies out of Bakersfield reads in a journal about this Peter Lebec who might have been killed at Fort Tejon and he was buried. So they go about on a grave hunt, and they come to Fort Tejon to look for his grave, and they do actually have a picnic there. They find him, they're like, okay, he's all there, and they cover him back up and they leave, right? Now, let's fast forward from 1890 to 1954 when Fort Tejon becomes a California state park. With everything becoming a government property has to be very well documented. You know, there's a tree here, 5 feet from the tree is a building, 10 feet to the west is this. Well, they're like, okay, well, we heard that there's a grave here. Let's see if it's really there. So they dig him up again. Lo and behold, there he is. You know, there's a full skeleton missing hands, a foot, and I think a couple of ribs. But today, that is his marker. He still is under the oak tree, and he lies 3 feet below his marker. And every October at Fort Tejon, we do have a fundraiser event. We call it the Peter Lebec Candlelight Ghost Walk. It's not necessarily because of Halloween, but because Peter Lebec died in October. It just goes very well with the theme. And what we do is that as guests, you would come to Fort Tejon and you would get a candlelight tour of the grounds. Mind you, it's the only time of the year that California State Parks allows the public to be at the park after hours. And to make it family fun, the event begins around 4:30 in the afternoon with period games, arts and crafts for the kids. And then around 6:30, that's when after sunset, we will fire the cannon to wake up the ghosts and begin with the tours. Captain Kirkham. Captain Kirkham was another one of the officers who had lived at Fort Tejon. In December of 1856, Company A of the 1st U.S. Dragoons had received orders to proceed to Fort Reading. He did not leave with his unit. He actually stayed back with the ladies. One of the reasons we assume he stayed with the ladies was because his daughter was very ill at the time. Okay. And she did die from her illness. Here we have Betsy Kirkham, his daughter's headstone. The stone her parents placed on her grave read Betsy, although her baptized name was Maria Cooper Kirkham. What's so interesting about her story is that after the Fort Tejon was abandoned, people started looting, okay, just like anything else. It starts deteriorating, the buildings start deteriorating, and people, start looting stuff. And that little stone had disappeared, okay? And then in 1998, a lady up in the Eureka area, finds the headstone as a Halloween prop being sold at a yard sale, and realizes that this is too heavy, this is too real to be a prop. Honestly, the stone is about this big, and it's super heavy. It takes 2 people to carry, so there's no way it could have been a prop. So she does buy it from the yard sale and brings it back to Fort Tejon. And now we do have it at the fort, and every year when we have the Candlelight Ghost Walk, we do bring it back down to the museum for the public to see. So that was a nice gift. Now, the earthquake of 1857, it was also known as the Tejon earthquake. January 9th, 1857, around 8:20, we had a very, very, very big earthquake. Magnitude of about 8, some say 7.9, some say 8.0. It is the earthquake that started the San Andreas fault line. Even though San Andreas fault line is very far from Fort Tejon, the reason they dub it as the Fort Tejon earthquake is because it had the most damage. We lost most of our buildings, like the hospital, the second barracks, we lost a lot of our buildings at Fort Tejon from this earthquake. American Civil War, it transferred to the east in July 1861, soon after the outbreak of the American Civil War. That's where some of our soldiers did end up. And 9 officers who had served at Fort Tejon became generals during the war. So 9 officers from Fort Tejon are generals. Okay. The fort was then reoccupied by California volunteer troops in 1861 because when the war broke out, President Lincoln did request reinforcements from California. And a lot of the volunteers, we had about 17,000 volunteers came from California into the Civil War. So companies D, E, and G of the 2nd Volunteer Cavalry from July 6th to August 17 were being trained at Fort Tejon. And then Company B of the 2nd Cal arrived in January 1864 and remained there until the closing of September 1864. When they marched down to Drum Barracks, and then from there on, they went on to Presidio, and then their duties. Now, Fort Tejon was abandoned for good after September 11, 1864, and as I mentioned before, 9 of our officers became generals. Fort Tejon today. Well, today, Fort Tejon is a state historic park. It is also listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The original historic buildings have been documented by Historic American Building Survey. Several buildings have been restored, and 2 are partially open for visitors, mainly the barracks and the officers' quarters, also known as Captain Garner's house. And the park hours are from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., 365 days a year. So basically, dusk till dawn. What we do now at Fort Tejon is that every first Saturday of the month, come rain or shine, sun or snow, the fort comes alive as if it's 1856. So when you walk in, you feel like you walked into a history book. No, there are no reenactments. You're not going to see a whole, the show shebang. But when you walk in, it's very peaceful. It's a peaceful fort, a place, to go and have fun and relax and learn. And what we do is you get to see the soldiers in the barracks. So when you walk into the barracks, you will see soldiers. You'll see the dragoons, sitting and chatting with each other. Or you may find them on the parade grounds drilling. Okay, or maybe they're firing the cannons. And then you can also visit the blacksmith and the carpenter and the quartermaster. Or maybe come to the officers' quarters and meet some of the ladies and see what we gossip about. Of course, we do a lot of our cooking on open hearth, so you get to see how food was made back at the time. We do churn butter and, do the full cooking. Okay. The park fees are $3 for adults, and children $1, 6 and under are free. Frontier Army Days, it's a little bit higher because we are putting on a little bit of a show. And then, of course, we have the Civil War reenactments. There are no food concessions at the fort, so you may want to bring your picnic basket. Okay.
When did Civil War enact?
I'm sorry?
When did the Civil War enact?
The Civil War reenactment, right now we have it, it's penciled in, it's not penned in, but it's penciled in on the first weekend of June.
So is it every year?
Yes, we do have one every year. But we, back in the day, the 90s and early 2000s, we would have it every third Sunday of the every third Sunday of the month, and then they would have it every month. But and then the Civil War reenactment grew, and so we have other sites that we go to as Civil War reenactors. So people stopped coming. Okay, so instead of putting on a show every single month, we decided to have just one show, but make it a big show and have everything there. It is nice. And every year we try to add a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Last year we had a dance on the parade grounds with live music. And then we had, yes, live music. It was contra dancing. And we had tintype photographers. We had sutlers selling their goods. Very, very nice. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. There's so much to see. And what I highly recommend is also see if you can come both days, because even though it's on a weekend, it's not the same thing on both days. Saturday is usually geared more towards the soldier life, so you get to see the soldiers getting their mail call in the morning, their mail. You'll get to see them get their pay call, because the units will pay their soldiers according to their rank, and maybe even they have demerits. And then in the afternoon, we would have a Civil War era baseball game, blue against gray.
Really?
Yes.
They did that?
They did that too.
Wow.
Although back then they called it stickball.
Okay.
Okay, and then Sunday is more, Sunday you'll get to see, President Lincoln, President Davis. You'll see the Gettysburg Address. You'll get to see the surrender of Appomattox.
Oh, really?
Yes. So if you can come both days, because like I said, each day is geared towards a different side of the Civil War life.
First Saturday.
No, that's the Civil War. First Saturday would be the Dragoon program. So here we have, this is the first Saturday. This is what you'll see. You'll see dragoons dressed in their dragoon uniforms. As you can see, it's the blue uniform, the Union blue uniform, but with orange stripings. Back in the era, orange was for the dragoons, yellow was cavalry, red was artillery, and blue linings would have been infantry. So when you saw a soldier, but just by their linings, you would see what kind of unit they belonged to. Another thing that we offer at Fort Tejon is a student living history program. This is wonderful. If you are teachers, or teachers, or you have parents who have children, fourth and fifth grade level, it is highly recommended. It's the only field trip that the kids will always remember. So what it is, it's an overnight field trip. The kids would come when they get off the bus. We try to tell them to come in blue jeans because it matches the blue, pant uniform, and we will they will loan them dragoon jackets, but child size. They will get loaned a haversack, a tin plate, a tin cup, and a wooden spoon. And your mom is not here. She's not going to clean up after you. If you lose it, you lose it, and if you dirty it up, you're going to clean it up. And one of the things they do is they're going to learn hands-on interpretive lessons about U.S. history, California history particularly. And it's designed for the fourth and fifth graders because that's when they learn about California history. And although we recently started a day program for eighth graders. Children learn to work together as recruits, okay? And they get to learn how did the pioneers survive? What did they do? So as you can see here we have a nice group of kids fresh off the bus. They're cold, they're scared, they don't know what we're going to do, and we are referring to them as recruits. Some of the program stations, they will learn how to make period meals. So in the kitchen, they will churn butter and cut meat and cut vegetables and prepare their supper for that evening. Of course, chaperones and park staff would make sure that they keep them away from the fire. But nonetheless, they will learn about how to survive. And they would rotate, the kids would rotate. Here they are learning adobe brick making. With their bare feet. That young man is my son. Oh, there he is again. Okay, we also teach laundry and candle making. And a lot of these kids, who come on a field trip, they actually start, when they grow up, just like my son, they come back as volunteers. They come back and give back to the fort. They do carpentry. They learn how to make a toolbox. Cool, huh?
Yeah.
Well, if you come on a first Saturday, maybe.
Yeah.
And then in the blacksmith shop, we have the blacksmiths teaching them how to forge metal. And everything they make over there, they get to take home with them. So they get the piece of, they get a piece of steel, and then their little candles. And it's one of all the field trips that they go to, that's one field trip that they never forget because they have to survive it. Okay. Another thing that we do with the student living history program is that at the end of the day, they eat the supper that they made. So they, whether it's pork, pork stew, or sometimes, some parents or some teachers, they prefer, to cook the meat separate and the vegetables separate, just in case there's any vegetarians. And then afterwards, and then at night, they have a tour of the grounds and they get to sleep in the barracks. So we volunteers and everybody else, you come and visit Fort Tejon and then you have to leave at the end of the day. But the student living history program, they get to sleep overnight, and they get to sleep in the barracks just like the soldiers did. They sleep on the hay mattresses, okay. And then the next morning they wake up. They would have scrambled eggs and bacon. And then afterwards, they would have a brief lesson in historic weapons, and possibly the teacher would fire the cannon. Right? Now, at Fort Tejon Historical Association, what we do is we are a nonprofit 501c3. We were established back in 1983. We are a cooperative partner of Fort Tejon State Historic Park, and basically what we do is we support the park and its programs in any way we can. Through my fundraisers and the things that we do, any fundraisers that we do feeds back into the student program, feeds back into preserving Fort Tejon. So basically for the preservation of the fort and its history, promote educational and interpretive activities, fundraising, and public relations, things, what I'm doing today. Okay. Some of our upcoming fundraisers, mind you, these are tentative dates. We have the Civil War reenactment first weekend of June. Ladies, we have Victorian Tea Party. Okay. And we hold the Victorian Tea Party at Captain Gardner's house on the front porch. So basically, you are Mrs. Captain Gardner's guest. You don't have to dress up in Civil War stuff. You know, your Sunday best is fine. A Sunday best with a hat and gloves, perfect. And allow us to serve you. So you'll have, it's almost like Downton Abbey at Fort Tejon.
Oh.
Okay. We also have old-time 4th of July. Okay, that you must come. It's the best 4th of July ever because it's a day program, so it ends by 3, 4 o'clock. So if you have any evening parties, you know, with fireworks and whatever, you still have plenty of time to go back home, clean up, change, rest, take a nap, and then go to your evening festivities. What we do at Fort Tejon is that we do a 4th of July 1856 with a 31 cannon salute. Now, why 31? Well, 31 because California was the 31st state in the 1850s. And what we do is we salute each state of the Union by firing the cannon. And then for the kids, we have period games like sack races, tug of war, egg toss from our chickens at Fort Tejon, organic, and pie eating contest. So it's a lot of fun for the kids. You know, just come, bring your family, bring your picnic baskets, and just have fun. And then, of course, in October, as I mentioned before, we have Death of Peter LeBeck candlelight ghost tours. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have brought some of our gear and accoutrements from Fort Tejon if you want to take a look at them, if you have any questions. Yes, sir.
When they were taken down to Los Angeles, how did they get them up to Benicia? I don't think LA Harbor existed.
I know what I think they did. The LA Harbor it wasn't as big and vast as, because you got to remember, Phineas Banning, he's the one who started the LA Harbor. And when they transported the camels to Benicia, to Drum Barracks, Phineas Banning had already donated a parcel of land to the military.
I recall something about camels close, I think Arizona.
Yes, some say, there are rumors that, some of the camels were let go in Arizona. I'm not sure.
Because it was something like an Arab, as a matter of fact, was one of the...
Yes, High Jolly. Yes, well, because with the camels came 2 trainers. It was High Jolly and Greek George. High Jolly, after the Camel Brigade ended, he started gold mining, and that's how he ended up in Arizona.
There's a monument for High Jolly near Quartzsite.
That's it.
There
That's
you
the
go.
guy's name, Jolly. I
Yes.
recall that name. A big...
Yeah, there's a lot of interpretation
yes,
there, actually.
correct,
It's worth going
correct.
to. Question.
Yes, sir.
I've heard and read both ways that Beale didn't actually think the camels were a good idea. Is there any consensus on that, or?
Like you just said, there's also, we had heard in some things, they say that it was a great success, and then they say it wasn't a great success, that's why they had to sell it. You also have to take into consideration that back then he was partnered with Samuel Bishop, who was a judge at Kern County, and they were business partners. And then they tried to they tried to work, make it part of their business, but and then when their partnership dissolved, that ended that as well.
And one more question. Beal's Ranch kind of surrounds what's now the fort, or the park, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was fairly extensive.
It was fairly extensive, and now a lot of the park, the other side of the ranch, has been bought by Tejon Ranch Corporation.
Did you read Francisco Lopez's book called The Saga of Tejon?
No, I have not.
Check that out.
Okay.
Okay, you have to check it out. It's in special collections, but they'll release it, and it talks all about him living on Tejon Ranch and hanging out with Ned Beal and Alex Godet and all of that. It's really quite extensive, the knowledge, and they have historical photographs and whatnot.
Fantastic. I'm sorry, what was the name of the title again?
It's called The Saga of Tejon by Francisco Lopez. It was his uncle that discovered gold up in Clarita Canyon.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Then